Hello, this is John Miyares from the USDA NASS Great Lakes Regional Field Office in East Lansing, Michigan. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about what you should expect to find in each kit envelope, as well as the face page of the ARMS 2 questionnaire, the screening survey information form, and doing additional screening when necessary. I will also address additional issues surrounding specific data collection concerns tied to the 2020 crop year, including presenting some ideas as to how we might be able to conduct this survey over the phone. Inside each kit envelope, there are several items in addition to having a labeled blank questionnaire. Each form will have a screening survey information form, which I will begin discussing in a little while. There will also be a comment sheet if there are historic comments about the operation available, and a screening form, which must be filled out if the operation is out of business, didn't grow the target crop this year, or is determined to be an abnormal farm, such as a prison farm or university research farm, or changes its partners. There is a respondent booklet which contains a listing of common pesticides applied to the target crops, as well as their product codes, which are to be entered into Section D. The respondent booklet also contains a list of common commercial fertilizers and their formulations. There will be a consent form included in the event that you must contact a custom sprayer to collect pesticide information or some of the additional information from Section E regarding production practices. Finally, if the operation has been sampled for multiple surveys, blank paper questionnaires for those surveys, such as labor or the end-of-season vegetable survey, will be in the envelope. Enumerators are encouraged to try to collect the data from the smaller surveys when setting up the interview for ARMS 2. Please note that although we are providing paper forms for your convenience, all data collected on these surveys must be entered into CAPI. So what aren't we including in the kit envelopes this year? For several years, we included a blank grid map that could be used to help draw out the field locations to aid with field selection. However, enumerators reported that generally these were not beneficial, and many would simply draw a map of the fields on the back of the kit envelope instead. While we will keep an electronic copy of the grid map available on the Purdue site, and we will print out a small number of copies for enumerator use, we will not be printing out one grid map for every sample. For 2020, NASS decided not to develop or print pesticide or fertilizer supplements for ARMS 2. Historically, very few are used on field crop chemical surveys, and the CAPI instrument being developed for collecting and submitting data for ARMS 2 in 2020 can handle over 90 lines of chemicals or fertilizers. To that end, the agency felt it could use resources elsewhere by not printing pesticide or fertilizer supplements. If a supplement is needed, enumerators are advised to use extra blank copies of the questionnaires that can be torn apart and merged with the data being collected. In past years, we have included a second blank copy of the questionnaire that enumerators could hand to operators for them to read along while completing the interview. In 2020, with all enumeration taking place by telephone, there didn't seem to be a need to send a second copy of the form along to the enumerator. Finally, while Michigan growers who complete a fall chemical survey are eligible to receive 2 credits towards their private core or commercial core restricted use pesticide applicator license, we are not sending the bubble sheets to the enumerators in 2020. The regional field office will have to send a form to the individual operator for them to complete and sign and send back to East Lansing after they complete the survey. In most years, operators only receive a postcard announcing the ARMS 2 survey and a pre-survey letter to let them know that they will be contacted by an enumerator who will set up a personal interview in the coming weeks. For 2020, in the absence of personal interviews, NASS is sending all operators a copy of the questionnaire, a copy of the respondent booklet, and a special version of the pre-survey letter which will explain the importance of the survey and ask for their cooperation, as an enumerator will be contacting them by phone to set up an interview to complete the survey. The blank questionnaire will have a watermark across all of its pages that says "Information purposes only," and it is intended for use by the operator to follow along in the interview with the enumerator over the phone. Operators are not expected to fill out the forms themselves, but they may try to in advance of the scheduled interview. Operators will not be receiving a reply envelope to return any paper forms received, and there will be no EDR instrument available for operators to complete the form themselves online. In order to help promote participation and response on the survey, we are also working with each state's soybean associations to develop an industry support letter, which asks growers to complete the survey and to be cooperative with enumerators when they call. These will be mailed to respondents separately from the rest of the pre-survey materials. Each sampled operator was screened for inclusion in ARMS 2 based on data reported in a screening survey conducted in May, June, and July. The screening supplement insert will show the information obtained or estimated from Phase 1 on the type of operation reported, who reported on the screening survey, how screening data were obtained, and even the enumerator number if that is available. The number of target commodity acres reported or estimated for from Phase 1 is on this insert. For multiple operating arrangements, also known as 85-45 operations, the screener indicates which operation was selected for the survey. If there is a big difference between the commodity acres reported on Phase 1 and Phase 2, then please write thorough notes on the screening form explaining why the difference appears to be there. A big difference might be at least 25% of the acres reported on the screening survey information form. Why might there be differences? For example, it may have been a different respondent completing Phase 1. The spouse might have completed Phase 1, and the operator is completing Phase 2. It's also possible that the information written on the screening form was planting intentions, but not acres actually planted. Also, if there were acres on the screening form, but there are no acres now, that situation is going to require very explicit notes to be written down. If they do not grow the target crop, you can go to item 4 of the conclusion and conclude the interview. Of course, if someone claims that they are out of business or don't have the target commodity this year, please leave good notes to explain the situation. It is very important that you review all of the inserts in the kit envelope, especially the screening survey information form and the comment sheets, to get a complete picture as to what is happening on the operation as you can before you begin the interview. A significant number of operations screened into Phase 2 were never contacted for Phase 1, but had their target crop acres estimated based on previously reported data. That data may have come from an earlier crop stock survey, may have come from the 2017 Census of Agriculture, may have come from Farm Service Agency. It is not certain where that data came from. The coding of these records would make them all look like they would have been complete so that they would not have to get rescreened. However, we did modify the screening survey information form to indicate whether or not the acres that were on that form were reported or were estimated. On the label on the kit envelope, the label will indicate A1 yes or A1 no to show whether or not that operator did participate in the ARMS Phase 1 or the Integrated Screening Survey. Nobody who refused Phase 1 or who was inaccessible for Phase 1 was brought into the Phase 2 sample. However, about 2/3 of the sample for Phase 2 came in without ever having been contacted or attempted to be contacted for Phase 1. So please pay attention to this note on the label. Operations that did not complete the Phase 1 survey may need to be rescreened to see if they ever had the target crop. Here is an example of what a screening form might look like for an operation which was not contacted for Phase 1. The total acres of land operated and cropland will be unknown. The acres of soybeans planted for 2020 will be an estimate based on other historic information. This information may have come from a 2019 survey, the 2017 Census of Agriculture, or from Farm Service Agency. There is no guarantee that this information is correct. If a respondent indicates that their soybean acreage is very different from what is on this form, please leave a note on the form to explain the situation. If a respondent asks you where the numbers on the form came from, just say that it came from an old report. Never tell the respondent that we got their data from Farm Service Agency. Also included in most of the kit envelopes is a comment sheet. It is very important that you read all of the comments about the operation before contacting the operator to set up an interview. There may be some important historic notes about the operation, but there may also be some current enumerator notes which ask for clarification on other comments on the form. On this slide, you will see an example of a comment sheet from a previous year with some important questions that will need to be answered about the operation that might change the nature of the interview. Please note that although this comment sheet is from a previous year, the one for this year will be very similar to the one you see on this slide. For example, this operator told us during the cash rent survey that he was out of business. When we attempted to code this operator out of business, our colleagues at the Frames Maintenance Group, or FMG as they are known, in St. Louis, told us that we needed to leave it active because there were crops signed up for the current year. Upon further review by the stat, it looked like this operator might now possibly be a landlord or a partner with someone else, but the only way we can get clarification on this is by contacting the operator directly and asking. Here is an example of a bar-coded label that will appear on either the front of the questionnaire or on the outside of the kit envelope. Directly below the barcode is the state and POID along with other coding. The survey code printed there is the one normally used by operators to complete surveys online using the AgCounts website. For ARMS2, this code will not work because ARMS2 cannot be completed by the operator doing the form themselves online. However, because the label is standard, we have no way of removing the survey code from the labels. Below the survey code, you will see where it says A1_yes. This is the indication that this operator has completed ARMS Phase 1, or the Integrated Screening Survey, and the acres reported on the Screening Survey Information form should represent reported data. Had this said A1_no, that would say that the operator became eligible for ARMS2 based on historic information pulled forward from another survey, and the acreages listed on the screening survey information form may not be accurate. For 2020, right after where it says A1 yes or A1 no will be one of the 8 directions on a compass, including the primary cardinal directions of north, south, east, and west, or one of the intercardinal directions of northeast, southeast, northwest, or southwest. This direction will be used to assist with field selection for the 2020 survey in place of using a random number table. This process will be discussed in the next presentation. This form also indicates that the operator was selected for the soybean objective yield survey. For this year, if it makes the process easier, the same field selected for the objective yield survey is allowed to be used for the ARMS Phase 2. If the operator was selected in multiple samples for objective yield, then you may use one of those OY fields as the selected field for ARMS 2, but you should use the cardinal direction on the label to narrow down which field to select. For example, if the label says north and the operator is in 4 different OY samples, then use the northernmost of the OY fields as your selected field for ARMS 2. Below that, you will see the operator contact information, including name, address, and phone numbers. If there are any partners associated with the operation, they will be pre-printed in the partner box or will have their own label included. All names, addresses, and phone numbers for target operators and partners should be verified and updated as necessary. If a new partner needs to be added or if an old partner needs to be removed, that should be indicated on this form or on a screening form. Please note that the addition or removal of partners may require that a screening form be completed for this operation. When the operator agrees to complete the interview, be sure to record the beginning time in the box in military time, which runs on a 24-hour clock. For example, if the interview begins at 2:30 p.m., record the time as 14:30 as shown here. The last item you see is the screening box. This may be filled in with a 1 if it is determined that this operation requires additional screening. In most years, there will be very few forms that actually need to be rescreened because they only include operations that were inaccessible for Phase 1. However, some will have to be rescreened because they didn't grow the targeted crop this year and the historic data that was pulled forward onto the screening survey information form isn't accurate. Again, this will be indicated by whether or not you see A1 yes or A1 no on the label. If you do need to complete a screening form for this operation, enter a 1 in the screening box. Before beginning data collection, develop an introduction you are comfortable using. In the introduction, include who you are, who you represent, and the purpose of your contact. Don't feel pressured to have to complete the ARMS 2 interview on the first contact. It may be enough just to set up the interview, then complete any matching surveys that are included in the kit envelope. You should be familiar with the purpose of the survey and the ARMS program as outlined in Chapter 1 of the Interviewer's Manual and in the presentation titled Intro to ARMS 2 and Purpose. Some operators may have already heard about the ARMS on radio or in television farm show broadcasts or short spots. Respondents may have also received a letter from their state commodity groups encouraging operators to complete the report. In 2020, they should have also received a pre-survey letter from the regional field office along with a blank informational copy of the questionnaire and respondent booklet. The pre-survey letter explains that although this survey is normally conducted using field enumeration, the current situations prevent us from being able to conduct personal interviews. When making your introduction, remind the respondent that the data they report will be kept strictly confidential. All information they provide will be used only to make state, regional, and national estimates. Be prepared to answer questions the respondent may have about the purpose of the survey and the uses of the data. One of the biggest challenges we will face in 2020 is determining how we are going to be able to collect this very important and very complex data over the telephone. While your supervisor may have some particular strategy in mind as to how to approach the interview, the regional field office has some ideas to consider, which we will share. First, we need to get the operator to agree to do the survey. Hopefully, you are able to help the operator understand the importance of completing the survey, and once you have that cooperation, it will be a matter of doing what we can to use the time you have with the operator wisely and be as accommodating as possible in order to make sure the interview goes smoothly. Once the operator has agreed to complete the survey, we want to make sure that we are making this process go as smoothly as possible. First, you should let the operator know what the major sections to the survey are. One field is going to be selected from all fields planted to the target crop to serve as the focus of the survey. Then we will want to look at any fertilizers applied to that selected field, going back to the harvest of the last crop from that field to the harvest of the current crop. Next, we will be looking at any chemical applications to the field, including treatments for weeds, insects, diseases, nematodes, defoliants, or other chemical treatments, starting from the harvest of the previous crop and continuing until the harvest of the current crop. Finally, there are going to be a set of questions on integrated pest management and best management practices. Helping the operator know what they are going to be getting into may help the operator realize what they need to do in order to best prepare for the interview. The operator should have received a copy of the questionnaire in the mail along with a copy of the respondent booklet. For many of the questions, it will be helpful if the operator can follow along with you as you complete the form, especially with questions that have long lists of multiple choices that the respondent can choose from regarding pest management practices. If the respondent lost their copy of the form, the regional field office does have enough additional forms to send an additional blank copy of the questionnaire to the respondent. Finally, mention that some farm records, particularly records of fertilizer or pesticide applications, will be useful along with any notes or records of when field operations took place. As you begin the interview, you want to verify the contact information on the label and verify the total target crop acres. Be sure to check the screening survey information form for possible discrepancies with historic data that may have been reported either during Phase 1 or other sources. Remember that the label should indicate whether the operator completed the ARMS 1 or integrated screening survey in May, June, or July. This could explain any discrepancies discovered. Next, work through the field selection process, which is discussed in the next presentation. Finally, work with the operator to collect what you can by phone. The easiest questions to answer may be those from Section E on pest management practices, so it might be a good idea to complete those questions first before attempting to collect the fertilizer and chemical application data. When you do get ready to talk about the spray records, you will want to discuss with the operator the best way of getting that information. If there were very few products applied, which may be the case for some target crops like soybeans, you might be able to collect this data over the phone. If the operator believes it would be better to send the spray records along, we can work with that as well. But we may need to get creative in how we obtain them. Some operators may wish to mail or fax hard copies of the forms, while others may want to send electronic copies of records via email. A number of respondents may be hiring custom applicators to do the spraying for them, in which case we will need to obtain their verbal consent to contact the custom applicator to get those records. Please note, if we can get at least one of the three main sections of the questionnaires complete, either section C, D, or E, we can count it as a complete report. Obviously, we must always strive to obtain as much information as possible from the respondents, but if they are willing to perhaps provide spray records but not answer all of the pest management questions, or maybe they're willing to answer the pest management questions but are hesitant about sharing their spray records, that will be okay for our purposes. We want to get as much information as we can, but we also want to stay in these operators' good graces. The form is only a refusal if the operator cannot or will not provide information that we can use for sections C, D, and E. How long should the interview take? The Office of Management and Budget has said that they expect this questionnaire should take on average 50 minutes to complete. In our region in 2018, the PPCR, or long form for the soybean crop, averaged a 60-minute interview, while in 2019, the PPR for wheat averaged about a 40-minute interview. I would expect that given the soybean survey in 2020 is a PPR short form and not a PPCR long form, that the lengths of the interviews will be similar to what we saw last year with the wheat survey. It is vital that Phase 2 and Phase 3 questionnaires be completed for these operations, as data from both phases will provide the link between the agricultural resource use and the farm financial conditions. Typically, only long-form ARMS 2 respondents, those completing the PPCR, will be sampled for Phase 3. This is not necessarily true for those in the PPR. For 2020, there are no PPCR or production practices and cost reports being administered in the Great Lakes region. On the front of the questionnaire, you are going to see the OMB burden statement. The burden statement includes standard language that shows up on all NASS surveys which quote the legal authority for NASS to be able to collect survey data from farmers. It also cites the various laws which protect the confidentiality of farmers who do report their data, and it specifies that the reporting of this data is voluntary. You will also see in the second paragraph that there is a valid OMB control number listed, which should match the one at the top of the page. It also says near the very end of the second paragraph the amount of time necessary or expected to complete the survey on average. A few operations may have a screening supplement inserted in their kit envelope because they were inaccessible during the ARMS Phase 1, or Integrated Screening Survey. Screening supplements may also need to be completed for operations if they change their operating arrangement from a sole proprietorship to a partnership, expanded and are now operating multiple farms, or what we call an 85-45 situation, or if they did not grow the target crop this year, or perhaps if they are out of business. If it appears that the operator is out of business, be sure to probe carefully for the presence of other agriculture, including land in conservation programs such as CRP. If it is an 85-45 situation, and the operator did not grow target crops on the sampled operation, but did on the other operation, we may be able to collect the information for the second operation, which did grow the crop. Please contact the regional field office for guidance in this situation. If the operation was taken over by a different operator or operation, please take notes about who the new operator is so we can update our records. This note should include a name, address, phone number, and any other pertinent information about who the new operator is. If, after completing the screening form, the operation appears to be completely out of business, complete the screening supplement and return it with the questionnaire. For the 2020 crop year, NASS is developing a CAPI instrument that will be used to enter and submit data for the fall chemical use surveys, including ARMS-2. More information about how to use the CAPI instrument specifically will be provided in a separate video. However, because this CAPI instrument will be brand new to everyone, we expect that there will be a few bugs and flaws that we will have to work through as the survey progresses. Because of this, we are advocating that all data collected in interviews with respondents be reported on paper before transcribing the data into the iPad. In the event that the technology fails, it will be important to make sure that the paper copy of the form is being maintained and filled out correctly. If there are questions about the data being pulled in to the CAPI instrument, an accurate paper copy of the form will be critical in resolving any problems or concerns which may arise. To that end, the following points of advice are recommended for all enumerators completing forms on paper, and items should be double-checked within 30 minutes of completing your interview or submitting the form into the CAPI system. Be sure you are reviewing your work. If you have any questions or concerns that as you look back at the form don't make any sense, it would be better to talk to the operator sooner rather than later while the content of the interview is still fresh in both of your minds. Make sure that all of your entries are clear and easy to read and written in pencil in case something needs to be erased and data needs to be changed. Be sure to follow the specific instructions regarding how to answer yes/no questions or answering questions with none. For answers that are numeric in nature, where you might be entering information about how much of a particular quantity of something might be applied, or how many times something occurred during a growing season, and you might say 0, then you can put a dash in that particular cell. Most of the yes/no questions now require you to enter a code 1 for yes and a code 3 for no. There are also some questions you will see that have checkboxes where you would just check a box to say yes or no. If the respondent doesn't know the answer or refuses to answer the question, please write DK for don't know or RF for refused in the margins near the cell box. Never enter the letters DK or RF in a cell box. Here are a few more reminders about recording information on the paper form and conducting the interview. Be sure to read the instructions and the questions exactly as written. If you are stumbling or worried about stumbling over the questions, remember that respondents should all have an extra blank copy of the questionnaire to read along with you. As part of your training, you're expected to complete a practice interview over the phone with either your supervisor or another enumerator in your supervisor group. This should help you get used to the idea of completing this interview over the phone. Please follow the skip instructions. There are some questions that, based on how a respondent answered, will not need to be asked. Do not forget to record the start time and end time for the interview in military time. Any notes about unusual situations should be recorded in the margins or could be put on a blank page of the questionnaire, the back page of the questionnaire, the comment sheet, or any other inserts. Any comments you collect should also be transcribed into the CAPI system. Finally, keep a close eye on pre-printed decimal places. When recording crop acreage, that is always recorded to 1 decimal place, or the nearest tenth of an acre. So 20 acres should be reported as 20.0 acres. Chemical application rates are always to 2 decimal places, so those should be recorded with 2 zeros after the decimal point if it is an exact number. So 2 pints to the acre would be recorded as 2.00 pints to the acre. If the application rate were 4.5 ounces per acre, you would write 4.50 ounces to the acre.